This bill comes after news of several near misses at airports around the country, including here in Austin. What does this bill do when it comes to safety improvements?
Well, this bill does a major investment into safety in aviation. It, among other things, directs the FAA to hire substantially more air traffic controllers. That will help with safety. That will also help with reducing delays. It also invests significantly in technology on runways. We've seen, as you've noted, multiple near misses, including one at Austin's Bergstrom Airport, where two planes came within a couple hundred feet of each other, nearly collided. And so this invests in technology to try to prevent potential runway accidents like that. This bill also invests billions of dollars in airports and infrastructure in Texas and all throughout the country. You know, in the state of Texas, aviation is enormously important. It produces hundreds of thousands of jobs in the state of Texas, and there are millions of jobs in Texas that depend on having a vibrant aviation sector. And so this bill was a bipartisan landmark legislation designed to really impact and improve aviation in America.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it's a huge bill. So what's in it exactly for Texas air travelers?
Well, for Texas air travelers, there is, as I said, an added investment in safety. There is also $4 billion going to airports across the country. Much of that will go directly to Texas airports and have a significant impact there. There's also a really big victory that we won in this bill, which is there's going to be now a direct flight from San Antonio to Washington's Ronald Reagan National Airport. Reagan Airport is the only airport in the country that has, by law, a limitation on how many flights can come into and out of it. And San Antonio has never had a direct flight, and that has been a major priority for San Antonio for years. Several years ago, a delegation from San Antonio came to me, sat down in my office, and asked if I could lead the fight to try to make this happen. And this was the business community in San Antonio, the elected officials in San Antonio, and I said, yes, I'm happy to lead that fight. And to make the case, you know, San Antonio is the seventh largest city in America. It also has an enormous military population, so much so that its nickname is Military City, USA. And with large populations of active duty military and veterans living in San Antonio, Reagan Airport is right next to the Pentagon. It's right next to Arlington Memorial Cemetery. We had a big battle. It was a big battle in terms of whether to add the additional flights so San Antonio could get a direct flight. But at the end of the day, we prevailed. And the result is going to be that the citizens of San Antonio can fly to and from Reagan directly rather than having to connect or fly to another airport that's less convenient.
You mentioned the fight. This squeaked in just under the deadline. What was the big challenge to get this thing passed?
Well, look, it really was building bipartisan compromise. And I have to say, the way this bill moved forward, I think is a model for how legislation should move forward. It moved through regular order, which means it started in the committees. I am the ranking member of the Senate Committee of Commerce, Science, and Transportation. The Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over roughly 40% of the United States economy, including all of aviation. And so for months, I've been working with the chairman of the committee, Maria Cantwell, a Democrat from Washington State, and she and I have been working to negotiate this bill and to reach a bipartisan compromise. In the process of drafting the bill, we solicited from our colleagues their priorities, and this bill incorporates priorities for over 200 different amendments that came from other senators, from Republicans, from Democrats, addressing needs and concerns they have in their states. That process was an extended negotiation as we worked through incorporating those amendments. And the final product we had was voted on Thursday night, and we saw an overwhelming bipartisan vote. In fact, out of the entire Senate, there are only 4 no votes out of all 100 senators.
Now, our partners at the Hill reported that some of your fellow senators gave you some ribbing as you tried to keep this bill on track, basically saying they found it kind of funny since they see you as usually the one blocking legislation with amendments or other holds, working for bipartisan legislation. Do you see this as a different role for you?
Well, it is true that my colleagues have enjoyed giving me some grief the past couple of weeks and managing the process through. And this is the largest bill that I've managed on the floor. Part of the reason for that is to manage a major bill, you have to be either a chairman or ranking member of a major committee. And in the Senate, that depends on seniority. And so I became the ranking member of the Commerce Committee just this past year. And so much of that is just the nature of how the Senate operates, that you have to accumulate enough seniority to be in a position to move major legislation. But yes, my colleagues were giving me grief. I sort of laughed because when I was managing the bill, I did it on the Senate floor from Mitch McConnell's desk, and I was threatening to carve my name in the drawer if they kept at it, which is an old tradition that you sign your desk when you're done serving. But look, you ask if it's something new, and I would say actually, no, it is not. So I've been in the Senate 12 years, and my job for 12 years has been to fight for 30 million Texans all across our state. And that entails a number of things. One thing it entails is fighting against bad policies. So if there are policies that hurt Texas, whether they were coming from Barack Obama or Chuck Schumer or Joe Biden, I've been proud to lead the fight against them. So if you see policies of Democrats pushing open borders, if you see policies of Democrats undermining law enforcement, if you see policies of Democrats pushing job-killing regulations or attacking the energy industry in Texas, I've been proud to lead the fight against all of that. If you see policies from Democrats funding Iran and funding Hamas and undermining Israel, I am proud to lead the fight against those bad policies. At the same time, I've spent 12 years working to draft and pass meaningful legislation that impacts and benefits Texans. And actually, this bill, the FAA bill, it so happened it is the 100th bill that I have authored and passed into law. And so this has been something I've been doing the entire time, drafting legislation, getting bipartisan support for that legislation, passing it into law. And I'll tell you, my principal focus when it comes to drafting and passing legislation is jobs, 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 because that's my number one priority in the Senate, and that's the number one priority of Texans.
So you mentioned Chuck Schumer. Our reporters in Washington are hearing from sources that Senator Schumer may bring the Langford-Murphy bill back for consideration in the Senate. That's a bipartisan border security bill that failed earlier this year. Curious if you're hearing anything about the bill potentially coming back and if you think it has a chance.
The bill is going to go nowhere, and there's a reason it's going to go nowhere, because it was a terrible bill. And unfortunately, the Democrats have decided that they want open borders. If you look at what is happening at our southern border, it is truly tragic and indefensible. I spend a lot of time at our southern border. Obviously, there's no state impacted more by these open borders than Texas. And under Joe Biden and the Democrats, they've made a conscious decision to break the border. When Biden became president, he inherited the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. We'd achieved tremendous success. I worked hand in hand with President Trump at securing the border, and we had achieved massive success. Biden deliberately broke the border, opened the border. We now have the worst illegal immigration in history. More than 11 million illegal immigrants have crossed under Biden. And this Chuck Schumer bill was a terrible bill that what it did is it codified, it put into law Joe Biden's open border policies. It put into law catch and release, which is what they do now when they apprehend someone, they just let them go. That's a huge cause of this chaos and open borders. It put into law, it normalized 5,000 illegal immigrants a day. That's 1.8 million a year, every year into perpetuity. It gave work permits to illegal immigrants. It gave taxpayer-funded lawyers to illegal immigrants. It gave billions of dollars to the NGOs that are assisting the human traffickers. And so it was a bad, bad bill. Look, I think there is nothing more important for safety and security in Texas than securing the border. Tragically, Joe Biden and Democrats, including Colin Allred, my opponent, who's voted in favor of open borders over and over and over again, they are unwilling to secure the border. But the good news is, I think November is going to be a very good election. I think we're going to see President Trump reelected, and I think we're going to see a Republican Senate and a Republican House. And if and when that happens, we will secure the border in January of next year, and it will happen like that. And I can say that with confidence because we did it before. And the way to fix it is reverse the policy decisions Joe Biden and the Democrats made to cause this crisis.
You know, safety of a different kind is on the minds of a lot of people here in Texas right now. Severe storms caused a lot of damage here in central Texas this week, and we saw bad flooding, as you know, over the weekend closer to where you are in Houston. What are you hearing from constituents about needs after those storms?
Well, look, obviously there have been serious storms in San Marcos and Johnson City. You saw hail that was reported up to 5 inches in diameter that did significant damage to homes, to businesses, to power lines, delayed students getting to school. There's obviously a process of cleanup and coming together. Now, fortunately, that we did not have significant injuries reported, so that's something to be grateful for. Likewise, down in the Houston area, the flooding we've seen in the past couple of weeks has been serious, and people are in the process in both cases of rebuilding, of going in and trying to turn things around. I will say, in a state as big as Texas, we deal with tragedies. We deal with natural disasters. That's simply part of life in Texas. I'm a Houstonian. If you live on the Gulf Coast, hurricanes are part of living on the Gulf Coast. And I will say, in the wake of any disaster, the pattern is always the same. I was just up in the Panhandle several weeks ago when the wildfires were raging there. And what we saw in the Panhandle is we saw Texans helping Texans. We saw churches and charities and volunteers coming together and helping each other. That's what we see with every disaster. It's what we saw all along the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Harvey. And in the wake of Hurricane Harvey, I authored legislation that created more favorable tax treatment for Texans who were rebuilding after Hurricane Harvey. And so it provided tax relief for rebuilding. That was legislation I authored along with John Cornyn and with Marco Rubio, and we passed that into law to provide relief for Texans. I'm right now have introduced legislation focused on the Panhandle fires, and in particular providing relief for ranchers there who lost very substantial parts of their cattle herds, and in particular lost many cows and many calves, working to enhance the programs of the Department of Agriculture to provide a safety net for those farmers in Texas. So there is a role for government in dealing with these tragedies, and there is also consistently, we see Texans helping each other come through a natural disaster.
All right, Senator Cruz, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.